What did the war take from you?
What did it take from me? It took my father, my happiness, and my self-respect.
It took my grandparents and my youth.
An education.
My father, my grandparents, it took my memories.
My freedom and my entire family. It broke my heart. My heart is still broken.
Where does your courage come from?
My courage comes from believing, having faith in religion and human beings.
It comes from my parents.
Courage comes from a strong desire to overcome. For me, it also came from my husband.
Courage is not an option. It is necessary to survive.
I still don't know where my courage came from. I guess God helped me. I needed to fight for my life. I just really, really wanted to live. I had to live.
Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto. This is my favorite. Music was always in my home. It was such a big part of my life. I was born in 1928 in Czernowitz, Romania. My brother Samuel, who was a few years younger than me, was a musical genius, a prodigy. He played the violin. I played piano, but actually preferred reading. We grew up in a very close Orthodox home. My mother encouraged music, and my father owned a grocery store. We were happy. Life was comfortable. But as the Second World War approached, you could feel the tension. In 1940, the Russians took over. As the political climate grew tenser, I remember my father's German friend, Mr. Schwartz, warning us.
Burl, I am very concerned for what may lie ahead. I am hearing from Vienna that Jews are being shot and killed in the streets. I never would have believed that this could happen.
I am sure that this won't continue. The Germans are cultured people who would never in a million years fall for Nazi ideology.
But they are falling for it. This is very much happening in Vienna. You should think about packing up your family and leaving.
The rest of the world will never stand by and tolerate Hitler's plan. And even if we wanted to, I don't know where we would go.
After the Russians took over, my father gave up his store to avoid being labeled a capitalist. Mr. Schwartz and my father continued their talks, but this wouldn't last for long.
What do you think will happen between Stalin and Hitler?
I bet they won't keep their promise to each other. You can never take dictators too seriously. Before you know it, they'll be down each other's throats.
Soon after, the Soviet regime intensified. They began deporting Jews to Siberia, and we never knew if we would be next.
Wenn ich diese ausländische Propaganda ansehe, dann wird mein Vertrauen in unseren Sieg unermesslich. Denn diese Propaganda habe ich ja schon einmal erlebt. Fast 15 Jahre lang war diese Propaganda gegen uns gemacht worden. Meine ganzen Parteigenossen erinnern sich an diese Propaganda. Es sind dieselben Worte, dieselben Phrasen. Und wenn wir genauer hinschauen, sogar die gleichen Köpfe. Dasselbe Dialekt.
We must stay optimistic. All right? We must.
But in the summer of 1941, the Nazis entered.
In the interest of public safety and security, we proclaim that
street traffic of groups of more than 3 Jews is strictly forbidden except between the hours of 4 and 8 p.m. Jews are allowed to shop in the marketplace, but only between the hours of 9:30 and 11 a.m. Bread can only be bought after 6 p.m. Jews who are self-employed must immediately hang a sign at the entrance of their business reading Jew, along with their name, profession, and hours of operation. Jews of all ages and sex are required to prominently wear a sign on the left side of their chest. It is to be a yellow star made up of 2 even 3-cornered pieces of linen, thus forming a Jewish star measuring 6 centimeters from its center. Any digression from these laws will be punishable with camp internment or more stringent measures as applicable by law.
A ghetto was then formed, which separated us from the others. In October, we were ordered to pack our bags. We were being evacuated. We had very little time, but minutes before we left.
Herr Schwartz, what are you doing here? Don't you know how dangerous it is? How did you get into the ghetto?
Never mind that. You have to come with me now.
We are being deported now, but if the Nazis see you, they may kill you.
Gather your family and come with me. The war will not last forever. I can keep you safe until the war ends.
It's not fair to do when all the other Jews are being taken away. We must all stay together. It's the right thing to do.
It's not fair. It's not right. This is a matter of life and death. Please, I will take care of you and your family. Come with me.
There is no more time. We must all go now. Thank you for your kindness.
Mr. Schwartz tried to save our family's lives that day, but my father believed that Jews needed to stick together. We were transported to a labor camp in Transnistria, Ukraine. We started working for the first few days, collecting vegetables, but then the heavy snow started and the typhoid epidemic began. We stopped working at that point. We were 40 people in one room. We slept on hay in order to keep warm. Typhoid began to spread like wildfire, and it made people become delirious.
Lord.
Papa got sick quickly. He could barely move. Then one day,
Papa? Papa? Come on, Papa, wake up!
Papa, can you hear us?
Papa, get up!
Eva, Samuel, let him rest. Just let him be.
During the years after my father's death, Mama wanted our minds to stay active.
Teach your brother something.
Teach him what?
You both need to keep your minds occupied. I don't know how much longer we will be here for. It's important to keep that muscle strong. Do it for me.
3 times 6.
18.
4 times 6.
24.
8 times 6.
48.
Wow, Samuel, you got really good at this.
We started as 40 people in that room, and at the end of 2.5 years, only 11 had survived. In January 1943, there was an opportunity for orphans to be transported out. Our mother thought this was the only way for us to get out. She wanted to save us, so she registered us as orphans. We traveled in hay wagons and arrived in the ghetto of Balta. When we arrived, we were assigned a woman to stay with. When it got too dangerous, she hid us in a barn. That second night in the barn, I had a dream that I will never forget.
My father came to me. His loving presence was so comforting. His arms were spread out like he would be an angel, and he said, "Don't worry, children, you are safe. You will be all right."
Samuel, wake up! Father came to me. He said we're gonna be all right. He told us not to worry.
Shh, Eva. I think I hear something. The Russian artillery are coming and the Germans aren't responding.
My brother had such a good ear that he could hear the difference between the Russians and the Germans, and he was right. So is my father, who came to me in my dreams the night before. That day, we were liberated and soon reunited with our mother. The journey home was long and exhausting. When we arrived at our apartment, it was in disarray. I remember opening the closet, and underneath all of the dirt was this picture. My mother and my brother would too dream of my father. We all continue to dream of him because he lets us know that he's still with us.
My sad past has been told, so now I would like to tell you how I went from the past to the present. On the way to the DP camp, I met my future husband, Mayor. We were actually the second couple to get married in Fernwald, our DP camp. We were married by the Klosenburger Rebbe. Our only hope and goal was that things would go back to normal and we would have a normal life. When we found out that we could come to America, it was like a dream come true. We waited 3 years to go through the legal process to come to America. My family came to New York in 1949, where we were met by our family with whom we remain very close to this day. The early years were very challenging. It was my mother Esther, my husband Meyer, I, my daughter Linde, my brother Sam, all in one small apartment. It was difficult to adjust because we didn't know the language and didn't have any recognized education or skills. But we had each other, a new home, and we were very happy. In those early years, our safety was our family. The days were very long. We worked during the day, attending night school in the evening. My husband, Meyer, started off as a clothes presser for a clothing manufacturer, and I went to school to study accounting. Ultimately, I became employed as assistant controller at a department store with 37 branches in the South and West. I worked there for 8 years. When my husband was able to open up his own store, the LBC Clothing on the Lower East Side, I left my job to help him. That's where we stayed for 30 years until we both retired. We always lived in the Bronx and have lived for the last 36 years in Riverdale, where we have made wonderful friends and partook in a wonderful community. We are blessed with 2 children, Linda and Barry, Linda's husband, Alan, 2 grandchildren, Esther and Joshua, Esther's husband, Avi, 4 great-grandchildren, Eliyahu, Hadassah, Shlomo, and Netanel. Looking back on my life, I would let people think that the most important things are to be sincere and to always have faith in God and in oneself.
I was born on May 1st, 1930, in Munich, Germany. I was known as something called a Mischling. According to Nuremberg laws, established in September of 1935, Mischling is the German word for mixed race, someone who is half Jewish. Hitler divided this up into a few categories: Mischling of the first degree, somebody with at least 2 Jewish grandparents, and Mischling of the second degree, somebody with 1 Jewish grandparent. I was a Mischling of the first degree. I didn't know I was half Jewish until I was much older. I was baptized and raised Christian. My father wanted to protect me from all that was going on in the world. Little did I know at the time, but the German government was encouraging my father to leave and divorce my mother.
The political climate is getting worse day by day. They're encouraging anyone who is married to a Jew to divorce. You need to start thinking about what's best for your family.
Harold, I'm not interested in seeking your advice about this matter.
But your family.
My wife is my family. She's the mother of my children, my best friend, the love of my life.
You may be risking your children's lives. I'm telling you.
You're telling me nothing. You have no idea what it feels like to be in this situation, to have this burden on your shoulders day in and day out. My wife and I have made a life together. We've created a family together. How can I leave when we have another son on the way? You're a fool to think I would just throw that away.
I can't imagine how stressful this time was for my family. I was too young to understand anything that was going on at the time. In 1938, my Jewish grandparents got out of Germany and fled to France. However, my great-aunt Helen stayed with our family until the Nazis found out where she was.
Is Helen Wellish here? She needs to come with us.
A few days later, my mom made a package for me to deliver to the concentration camp. I'm here to deliver this to my great-aunt Helen.
You cannot come any further. We'll see that she gets it.
Later, we found out that she was shipped out east and perished in the concentration camp Piaski. I was the last person to connect with her through that package. I didn't know it at the time, but half of me was behind those gates. Half of me was being deported to those camps, but all of me feared for their lives. Hitler was working at annihilating half of me, and I had no idea until I was 13.
Students, let's go over the reading that was assigned to you for homework last night. What is the meaning behind the story?
Mr. Mueller.
Manfred, may I have a word with you? You need to pack your bags and leave school at once.
Leave school, but why?
Just go home, Manfred.
But I don't understand.
You're a Jew. Students, quiet! You can't be in school anymore. Go home, Manfred.
That was the day I found out I was half Jewish. All those years I thought I was just Christian. All those people who were hated, deported, and killed for being Jewish, they were half of me. I was so confused. I was no longer allowed back at school. At this point, my mother had given birth to 2 more sons. A few months later, in 1944, our home was bombed, and my family decided to leave for the countryside in Bavaria. Despite being married to a Christian, my mother was still living in fear. She was legally not allowed to come with us to Bavaria, but she came anyway. So my father made a hiding spot for her there, just in case.
We will be safe here. The closest police station is an hour away.
Oh, Max, I'm so scared. I'm so sorry our family has to live like this. I'm sorry that I have put us all at risk. Maybe you and the boys should just...
Gertrude, we will get through this together. We're a family. There's nothing that will separate us. The boys and I are going nowhere without you.
It feels like I've done something terribly wrong. That being Jewish is the most shameful thing in the world.
You've done nothing wrong. There's no reason to be sorry.
But what if something happens and it's all my fault? I don't know if I could live with myself knowing that.
Gertrude, this family's love is strong. We will never leave you. I will never leave you.
But soon after we arrived in Bavaria, my father was ordered to go to a forced labor camp. It was a consequence for not divorcing my mother. I was too young to understand at the time, but I can't imagine what my mother was going through. My father arrived back in Bavaria right before we were liberated. We returned to our home in Munich a year later, but I didn't see anyone from my mother's side. My grandparents, my great aunt Helen, or even my Jewish friends. I think often of my father's dedication to my mother, his unwavering commitment to their marriage. Despite encouragement from friends and the German government, he refused to leave her. He took their oath of marriage seriously, and our family stayed together. As time moved ahead, we learned of all the Jews that were deported, those who never came back, and those who perished. I am Mischling. I am half Jewish. I am half of these people. I am these people. These are my people.
Matilda Welash, Oma, deported from Paris to Auschwitz on February 13th, 1943. Murdered in Auschwitz on November 20th, 1943.
Max Welish, Opa, deported from Paris to Auschwitz on February 13th, 1943, where he perished shortly after.
Dr. Emmerich Welish, Fred's great-uncle, deported from Paris to Auschwitz on September 2nd, 1943, murdered in Auschwitz on September 7th, 1943.
Helen Welish, Fred's great-aunt, deported to Piaski on April 4th, 1942, and murdered shortly after.
Moritz Sandbank, close family friend, murdered in Dachau.
Louise Sandbank, close family friend, committed suicide by poisoning herself.
Martin and Berta Sandbank, childhood friends, deported to Izbika and murdered on April 10th, 1942.
I am these people. These are my people.
I stand before you not as a Mischling, not anymore, but as a Jew and proud of it. This came to me not as an infant, but as a teenager after the end of World War II. My parents and brothers and myself were lucky to live through and survive the 12 years of the Nazi regime, 12 years of terror, devastation, and murder of so many, including many relatives on my mother's side. And why? Because they were Jewish. I cherish their memory, although I was very young when they were taken away. I emigrated alone to America at age 19 and eventually served in the US Army for 2 years, met a Jewish refugee girl from Vienna, got married, raised 2 wonderful children, and now have 5 very special grandchildren. I regret that my wife did not experience the joy of watching her first grandchild's bar mitzvah. Cancer took her away from us at age 70. I thank Witness Theater and all participants for letting me share my story with you.
I was born in Poland on January 24th, 1924. My entire family, including my grandparents, lived in one house. We all had biblical names. My mother, Necha, my father, Yaakov, my grandparents, Sarah and Abraham, and my younger brother, Yosef. My childhood was filled with love and protection. A good education was important to my family, so for high school, I was sent to a private school in a different city. I loved going to school out of town, but sadly, it was short-lived. On September 1st, 1939, the war interrupted my education and my adolescence. It was the turning point in my life.
Rumors are spreading that it will become too dangerous for men to remain under the German occupation, especially men like me who hold important positions.
You must go and try to cross the border. If I know you are safe, then I can manage with the children. But I just can't leave the rest of the family now.
He kissed us and left with his 2 horses. My father had wanted to cross the Soviet Union border that day, but was not permitted, so he stayed in a village overnight, hoping to try again the next morning. But that night, the village was bombed. It killed him and one of the horses. The man who delivered the news of my father's death also brought the other horse home. When I saw the horse's eyes, I just knew. It was as if the horse could tell us the entire story through his eyes. We were heartbroken. My father was only 40 years old. I remember my brother saying Kaddish for my father every day.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yalma dibra chirotei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'biyomechon u'b'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agalah u'bizman kariv v'yimru. Amen.
Soon after my father's death, a ghetto was formed. My mother had thought of as many ideas as she could to get us out of there. Since my family did a lot of business with Czech farmers, they agreed to hide us. I left the ghetto first, staying with a family called the Dolichiks. The night before, they killed everyone in my village. My mother, my brother, and my cousin Malki joined me. A bunker was dug in the fields. Other people joined, so there were 12 of us. This would be the first of the many bunkers I would live in for the next few years.
Conditions are barely manageable down here. I'm so thirsty.
I have to go to the bathroom.
I'm so uncomfortable.
Yosef and I didn't dare complain to our mother. We knew that there was nothing she could do. One evening, after dark, we climbed out of the bunker in search of some food and noticed that it had snowed. This would put us in great danger if someone saw our footprints. The Dolichiks thought it best to divide us up. My mother and brother were going to go to the Kuchers, another Czech family, to hide. That night, I hid out in a bunker with 3 other girls and woke to this. They held us at gunpoint and forced us out of the ditch. They were going to kill us. I needed to escape. And just then, I remembered Jana Finkel, a woman who had tutored me in the ghetto. She had told me a story about how she had survived.
They exterminated 30,000 Jews in Babi Yar Kiev and left us in ditches. I was the only one alive, buried underneath dead bodies. Somehow, I crawled out from under the corpses and escaped.
And then what happened?
I was running, trying to find a place to hide, and that's when I saw a Nazi ahead. The only shelter I found was an outhouse, so I submerged myself in filth until it was safe to come out. Anna, you must be brave in these times. Do whatever it takes. It's the only way to stay alive.
Her words echoed in my mind. I needed to escape. Excuse me, officer. I need to use the bathroom outside.
Quickly.
As I walked outside towards the outhouse, I spotted a farmhouse where Ukrainian peasants slept. I snuck inside and slipped underneath his bed. I stayed there for 3 days and 3 nights, silent.
Where's the girl?
She escaped from underneath our fingers.
What?
I didn't know what happened that night, but on the dawn of the 4th day, I slid from underneath the bed. I remembered my mother and brother were going to the Kuchers. I didn't know how to get there, but the will to live pushed me in the right direction.
Anna? Oh, Anna, I'm so happy to see you.
I told Miss Kucher where I was hiding and how I got separated from my mother and brother. Miss Kucher washed and fed me, and then sat me down for the worst news of my life.
Anna, come, we must get the lice out of your hair. I'll help.
Miss Kucher, my mother and brother were planning on coming here. Have you seen them? Miss Kucher?
Anna, your mother and brother were killed.
No, they were planning on, I was supposed to be,
Sweetie, when you were hiding underneath that bed for those 3 days, they were hiding out in the Dolichiks' barn. They were found there and killed. They were never even able to leave the Dolichiks' land. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
וכל זאת ובכל זאת שמך לא שכחנו, ובכל זאת שמך לא שכחנו, אוי נא אל תשכחנו.
ובכל זאת ובכל זאת שמך לא שכחנו, ובכל זאת לא שכחנו, נא תשכחנו. בכל זאת ובכל זאת שמך לא שכחנו, ובכל זאת שמך לא שכחנו, אוי נא תשכחנו. ובכל זאת ובכל זאת ובכל זאת שמך לא שכחנו, ובכל זאת שמך לא שכחנו, אוי נא תשכחנו.
Do you have any scissors? I want to cut my hair. I just want to cut it off.
Oh, no, you can't. Your mother loved your beautiful hair. She would have never wanted you to cut it.
I stayed in Miss Kucher's home for 4 days. She helped me get a bit stronger, but ultimately she didn't feel safe hiding me. So the next few months I spent hiding out in another Czech village. My family did business with many of these people, so they agreed to feed me, and I would hide out in their barns, sheds, and ditches. Until one day, I got word that the Germans knew I was hiding out. I was so paralyzed with desperation and fear. Where would I go? What could I do? And once again, I remembered Jana Finkel and what she had told me.
Anna, you must be brave in these times. Do whatever it takes. It's the only way to stay alive.
I don't know how it happened, but my feet walked me right back to Miss Kucher's home. When I arrived, I met Miss Kucher's sister, Antonina Sindilazova. She decided that she would hide me with another family. This family was the Goldenbergs. Little did I know that I was about to meet my future husband and what would become my new family down in that bunker.
Did you hear that?
Sounds like a plane.
Do you think it's headed eastbound or westbound?
I can't tell.
Sam, What are the chances of us being discovered down here?
I don't know, but we must remain optimistic.
The Czech people have been so kind to us, but what if there's a traitor in the group? What if a few are not to be trusted and they rat us out?
It doesn't do us any good thinking like that. We must not give up hope.
What's the matter, darling? Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Does something hurt?
Come, George.
What hurts? Where, George? Where does it hurt?
It hurts everywhere. Just want to live so badly.
When the whispers finally died down, we would just sit in dark silence. 15 months felt like 15 years. We knew when Shabbat came, so every Friday night, we would light matches and whisper. There is nothing more challenging than doing nothing. We waited and waited and waited. During this time, Sam and I were spending a lot of time together. But, as you can imagine, it was a rather unusual courtship. Most lovers who are planning their lives talk about,
Where should we get married?
where will we go on our honeymoon?
How many kids do you want to have? Where should we live?
But instead, none of these questions were asked or talked about. We mostly just stayed next to each other, silent, hoping that we would escape, so that maybe we could start a life together.
I love you, Anna.
After 15 months, we did escape. However, nothing felt easy for a long time. So many challenges lay ahead. It took time, but I eventually did fall in love with Sam. We needed each other. We had survived together. Ultimately, we got married, starting a life together in a free world.
I will always remember the kindness of the Kucher family. Mother, Maminka, told her children, it is a very difficult time for the Jews now. We are much better off, and we have to help these people. They were hiding Jews and helped whatever way they could. There is still goodness in this world. Thank God for the good people. At one point, I didn't eat for about 3-4 days, and I decided to knock at a door and ask for a piece of bread. I knocked at the a Czech family door. And when the woman opened the door, she started to cross herself and cried, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Can I have a piece of bread?" She said, "You are asking for a piece of bread? Your father sent grain all over Europe and fed all the people in Europe. And you are asking for a piece of bread? It's the end of the world." Years later, after I was separated from my family, I was on my own, struggling from day to day. For years, where does one take so much strength? I guess the will to live is so strong and pushes you in the right direction. I survived in the most difficult circumstances. When the war was over, I realized that I lost my entire family. I was all alone. But there is still a world worth living. After a while, I got married, raised a family, and life goes on. I do not dwell on my gruesome past. I enjoy my family. I have lived to see grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I pray for their happiness and for a peaceful world.
I was born on August 28th, 1931, in Baku, Azerbaijan. I was given the name Vladimir, but I actually soon received the nickname Velva, which stuck with me my entire life. I had a very close relationship with my mother, father, and my sister Sophie. The first 10 years of my life were filled with so many happy and fond memories of me and my family just being together. Every year, me and my family would spend the summers up at my grandparents' home in the Ukraine. I had a very close relationship with my grandparents and always looked forward to spending this time with them. But the summer of 1941, all that changed.
We must pack our bags and leave immediately.
We just got here.
It's not safe, Velvo.
Mama, what's happening? Why are there bombs going off?
I will explain later. Kids, go get your bags. We will leave soon. Please come with us. We will leave on the first train back to Baku. The Ukraine is not safe.
This will not continue, I promise you.
Russia is invading the Ukraine. You have to come with us.
The Germans would never allow that to happen. Trust me, I know what kind of people they are.
In World War I, the Germans were the ones who helped save the Jews.
I don't think the Germans will help save us this time.
This is our home. We cannot leave it. Trust us, Vanya. We will be safe here.
Grandma, please come with us.
My sweet Velva, we will be all right. The bombing will stop soon, and maybe you can return later in the summer.
Before I knew it, My sister, mother, and I were on a train back to Baku. I had no idea what was going on. We were crammed on that train like sardines.
Excuse me. Kids, come this way.
Do you think they'll stop the train?
What if we can't get back to Baku? This must be a dream.
How much danger do you think that we're in?
Do you think this is the beginning of another war?
Mama, I can't move.
You're all right, Sophie.
War? What's a war? We were crammed on that train. None of us can move. I couldn't understand what was going on. Was war a game? Even though I didn't understand it, it began to make sense to me that we weren't safe. We got off the train and stayed with my aunt for a few weeks before continuing our journey back to Baku. We arrived back home in Baku on November 26, 1941. We were removed from the war and felt isolated from what was happening. In September, I started school again, and for the moment, everything seemed to be getting back to normal. But then, my father got notice they needed him on the front lines to fight. September 11th, he packed his bags to leave. When will he be back?
I don't know.
But you'll be coming back, right? What type of work will you be doing?
I will be helping to protect people.
Protect people from what?
There are a lot of bad people in the world, Velvel. And right now, they need the good people to help fight.
Where the bad people come from?
It's time I go. Don't worry, Velvel. Be strong for your mother and sister. I love you. Be strong.
Be strong, Velvel. Don't worry. Be strong. My father's words kept ringing in my ears, but I did worry. Every day I worried. 6 months later, we received this letter.
Dear Fanya Ozovitz, we are sorry to inform you that Isaac Ozovitz has gone missing. We are not sure of his whereabouts. We will do the best we can to try and locate him. We are so sorry to have to deliver this news to you.
My father was never found. We were later told that he was shot and killed in combat. I was too young then to understand what death was, that my father's truly gone. I became the man of the house, taking care of my sister because my mom had to work. When the war ended, we received more terrible news. It again came in the form of a letter. This one was from friends of my grandparents.
Dear Fanya, Vladimir, and Sophie, please let us know that you're all right and that you've made it back to Baku. It is horrible what is happening here. It's with such a heavy heart that I tell you this, but you must know. In October, the Nazis entered all the Jewish people's homes in your grandparents' neighborhood. They entered your grandparents' home and held them at gunpoint. Right before they shot, I heard your grandmother say,
"Kiss Vladimir for me!"
I am so sorry to have to deliver this terrible news.
On May 9th, 1945, I heard on the radio that the war was over and Germany was defeated. But feelings were mixed. There was so much relief, yet sadness everywhere. It took me a while to understand that my grandparents and father were truly gone. they were never coming back. When the war ended, I had no choice but to grow up fast. I was 11 when my father died and 14 when the war ended. My childhood was taken from me, and I was forced to move on. My mother was never the same after the war. I continued school, took care of my sister Sophie. I felt pretty numb, but I just kept moving ahead with life. But one day, I met Stara, and my whole world was about to change.
Last war second left me emotionally scared. Lost my grandmother and grandfather, together with their 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren. All were basically murdered by the Germans in October 1941 at the agro base in Mariupol, Ukraine. My father was died in June 1942 in the battle for Kerch in the Crimea, Ukraine. Brother of my father was executed by shooting by NKVD KGB at August 10, 1937. Me and my sister survived, and that is a miracle in itself. After war, I am graduated school and institute and work as mechanical engineer in Baku and Leningrad. In 1990, our family arrived in America. I am so happy in this country, and I appreciate this country. One, my grandson is working in Los Angeles. Second, in Washington, D.C. Me and my wife, Stella, live in New York and very happy in America.
I was born on May 30th, 1930, in Leningrad, St. Petersburg. I was an only child, but I remember being very close to my family. Leningrad had 5 million people, but only 1 synagogue, and it was never safe to publicly express our Judaism, so I never went. I had a wonderful childhood. I especially remember the white nights. Every summer, from June to July, the sky would light up. You couldn't tell the difference between day and night. I would take a book and go with my friends to the Neva River. We would be there for hours. It was a magical time. The world was so beautiful, it nearly took my breath away.
Sarah, look at all the colors.
Do you see the green and the pink?
It's like we're in a pretend universe.
Do you think everyone in the world could see this?
I hope so.
If they can't, then they're really missing out.
Oh, these nights always make me feel so free.
I hope that everyone in the world gets to feel this feeling. On June 22nd, 1941, our freedom was taken away. Gone, just like that. The Nazis created a blockade in Leningrad. All of a sudden, we saw planes flying above with swastikas. Then the bombing started. We tried to get on a train out of Leningrad, but all transportation had stopped. It was impossible to leave. I remember at first the sky lit up, bright red, but it wasn't the feeling of freedom anymore. It was the opposite. It was a reflection of all the fire and death around us. We were trapped, blocked in. That winter was terrible. People looked like skeletons, sick, starving, and dying on the streets. There was no power, no running water, and only 125 grams of bread a day. But in March of 1942, we found a way out.
The Ladaga Lake has frozen over. Your uncle has managed to get us papers to cross the lake.
But how will we cross?
We will hide out in flatbed trucks that are delivering food and supplies. This is how many people are escaping. It's our only way out of Leningrad. We leave tonight.
It took us all night to cross the lake. It was negative 40 degrees Celsius, and at any moment the German soldiers could start shooting if they suspected there were people in the trucks. It was the scariest night of my life. I'm scared.
Don't worry, Sarah. Try to sleep.
Sleep? How can you sleep?
You will need energy when we arrive.
Will there be more scary people when we get there?
No, sweetie. People will help us.
Well, why wouldn't people help us at home? Why did they trap us in?
Sarah, rest, my love.
Because we're Jewish?
Shh.
That's it? How can people hate us so much when we've done nothing to them? They don't even know us.
Because the world fears what it doesn't know. And then fear turns into hate. And then people just blindly follow.
Well, I'm not scared of what I don't know. I don't ever want to be like them.
Come rest, Sarah. Rest while you can.
I will never just blindly follow. When we got to the other side of the lake, the German soldiers started shooting. We were rushed onto a train headed to Kazakhstan. It took an entire month to get there. Conditions on that train were horrible. There was no food, no water, and no showers. At the stations, we were offered hot food, but people were so sick that they could barely eat it. Many people died on that train and never made it to Kazakhstan. After a month of surviving these horrible conditions, we arrived in Kazakhstan. There we were provided with jobs and housing, and I went back to school. But anti-Semitism followed us everywhere.
Oh, look, there goes Abraham.
And that's Sarah.
I can't believe you don't have horns growing out of your head.
We don't.
Maybe she's just covering them up.
Yeah, you Jews are always hiding something.
It seemed like it was impossible to escape anti-Semitism. We stayed in Kazakhstan until the end of the war. On January 27th, 1944, we heard on the radio that the blockade had come down. I remember dancing with so much joy. In 1945, we went back to Leningrad. I was 15 years old at the time. Our home was destroyed. Most of Leningrad was destroyed, so we lived with my grandmother. Life after the war was hard, but my family and I tried to rebuild. A few years later, I moved to Baku for my first job, and one day, I was walking down the boulevard with a friend when I saw Vladimir.
Belville, hi.
Oh, Anna, hello.
Belleville, this is Stara. She just moved here from Leningrad to start work.
Nice to meet you, Stara.
Time stood still. My heart dropped. Nice to meet you, too. We all walked around a bit that day, and I got to know Velvel and was immediately excited about him.
You should escort Stara home.
Velvel did escort Stara home that day.
That day and for the next 60 years of their lives.
I want to tell you a story about my family's life during Leningrad blockade. Already September 7, 1941, Nazis cut off railroad from the town. It was encircled, so we were late to leave. They bombed the city, many people were killed, and storehouses were burned down. So all the population was left without any food, beginning hunger. This was neither electricity, no water, no heating. Unusual cold winter began. Temperature was minus 40 degrees Celsius. More than 1 million people died. The saving was on the big land. The way was across frozen Ladoga Lake, named the Road of Life. It was only one way to leave Leningrad. In March 1942, my family moved on open lorries and went to the big land along frozen ice road. It was very dangerous. Germans could start attack any moment. Many machines with weak, sick people drowned under the ice. When we reached on the other side of the lake, we were lucky to survive. Price was 400 miles and 12 hours fierce. I remember all this horrible time till now. After 1 month's trip, we were arrived Republic Kazakhstan, Uralsk city. It was Leningrad epic. In 1945, we came back to Leningrad. I graduated school, institute, and worked as an engineer, and chemical engineer. In 1940, our family arrived in America. My mother, Berta Tsodikova, lived in America 21 years and died when she was 104 years old. One, my grandson is working in Los Angeles, second in Washington, D.C. Me and my husband will live in New York.
I was born on August 21st, 1927, in Frankfurt, Germany. My original name was Margit, but that later changed. I was very close with my family, but my grandfather, father, and husband are whom I wish to tell you about. These men were compassionate, loyal, and never gave up hope. Life in Frankfurt was wonderful, and Judaism was an important part of my family's life. My father was a businessman who worked in Switzerland during the week, but would always come home for Shabbat. My grandparents lived close, so Friday nights were always spent with them as well. Papa, you're home!
Hello, my sweet. How's your week been?
It was good. I went to the zoo and I got to see the bears.
Bears? Wow, I bet they were huge. I brought you a little something back from Switzerland.
Swiss chocolate? My favorite.
Hello, my loves. Better go get washed up before we say the prayers. Mom, can you help me set the table?
Please, come in.
Thank you for your kindness. What a beautiful home you have.
Well, actually, it's my daughter's home, but we always spend Friday nights together. Family, this is Alexander. He'll be joining us for dinner tonight.
On Friday nights, my grandfather always brought home Russians who had escaped the pogroms. That was the kind of man my grandfather was.
Welcome, Alexander. Please make yourself at home.
And then my grandmother would always say,
Samuel, it's very nice that you bring these poor people home, but could you try to choose people who smell a little better?
The dirtier they are, the bigger the mitzvah.
Gather round, everyone. Come. It's time for the blessings.
In 1933, when Hitler rose to power, my family decided to leave for France. For the first few years in France, life was good, but we increasingly felt things shift. Eventually, the Germans came to occupy Paris, and in 1942, we were able to buy false identification papers as French non-Jews. We hid out for the rest of the war in small towns and villages throughout France. We lived in disguise, having to give up our Judaism in public. But behind closed doors,
shh, quiet.
Don't answer it. Maybe they'll go away.
We have to answer it. They know this apartment's being occupied.
I am so sorry to bother you. I don't mean to intrude, but I heard you singing, and I thought I was dreaming. I'm a fellow Jew, and I haven't celebrated Shabbat in so long. Can I say?
Please, it would be our honor.
we were always committed to our Judaism. We just had to keep quiet about it. We promised ourselves that after the war, our dedication to Judaism would be loud and unapologetic. One day, my father was asked to show his papers. He couldn't hide his thick German accent, so he was sent to Gurs, a work camp. Later, he told me about the time in Gurs that he spoke to all the other men on Passover.
As we sit together on Pesach, I'm reminded how many times throughout history we have been enslaved. I'm reminded how many times we have been ostracized. We must remember the most difficult task Moshe had was not to get the Jews out of Egypt. It was to get Egypt out of the Jews. We must not become complacent as slaves. If a tyrant like Paro can be overthrown, then so can Hitler. We must not give up hope. Gentlemen, I'm begging you, please don't give up hope.
That was the kind of man my father was. Even in the camps, with those around him sick, starving, and dying, he didn't let them give up hope. My father returned from Gurs physically weak, but stronger than ever in spirit. He would always tell us,
if we get separated at any time, for any reason, we will meet at 47 Balfour Street in Haifa, Palestine. It's where your uncle lives. Don't forget this address.
47 Balfour Street,
47
Haifa,
Palestine.
47 Balfour Street in Haifa, Palestine.
47 Balfour Street, Haifa, Palestine.
Still to this day, I remember this address. We continued living like nomads, never feeling settled, but always feeling solid in our religious beliefs. While Jacqueline continued to live in disguise, her future husband was being separated from his family. I wonder if we could tell you a bit about him. Jacqueline's husband, Albert, passed away last January. We want to honor his memory and keep his story alive.
I'm not letting your mother go alone.
Where are you going?
We don't know. But promise you will take care of Max.
Max was deaf, so he's even more vulnerable than most.
I promise, Mom.
Here, take my jewelry. Keep it safe. I love you. I love you, boys.
Rouse! Rouse!
Albert found out a few days later that his parents were taken deep into the forest and shot.
Excuse me, sir? That's my brother. I can't leave him.
Albert had no idea where Max was going, but he was not going to leave him, ever. So together they set out for Auschwitz. Immediately, numbers were tattooed on their arms. 160761 and 160762, one number apart. Albert worked so hard to hide the fact that Max was deaf. If the Nazis knew that you had a disability, you were immediately killed.
Max, we must always be in a position where you can read my lips, okay? This is very, very serious.
Every morning, they'd march in line to the beat of a drum.
You see those drums over there? We have to march on the beat. Here, stay in back of me. Watch my body.
What's wrong with you? Idiot! March on beat!
This happened many times. Max couldn't always stay behind Albert. In Auschwitz, Albert met Norbert. Norbert would become his lifelong friend.
I have an idea. We have to get Max out of the marching line. He will never survive it. People who work in the kitchen get up earlier, so they don't march. I think I can get him a job in the kitchen.
Somehow, Norbert did this, and Max never had to march again. They were doing a good job at hiding the fact that Max was deaf. Besides, for the mornings, when Max would leave for work in the kitchen, they did not leave each other's sides. Albert always made sure that Max could read his lips. Albert was not going to let anything happen to him. But one day, Max returned from work with a yellow triangle bracelet. Albert knew what this meant. Someone had found out that Max was deaf. One day, Max left for work in the kitchen and never returned. Albert survived Auschwitz and the death march. The dedication that Albert had to keeping his brother alive was the same dedication that Albert had for 65 years with Jacqueline. We keep his honor and story alive.
After the terrifying war years and our long-awaited arrival in New York, I realized that I was 20 years old and was robbed of my youth, teen years, and most of all, no formal education, a fact that bothers me to this day. I went to work in the garment industry and to school at night to learn English, where I met my husband. After 3 years of marriage, our older son, Fred, came into our lives, and this was the happiest day of our lives. 3 years later, our younger son, Carrie, happily came to join us, and we finally led a normal life, raising our boys. We named them after my husband's late parents, and we wanted to impart into them their and my parents' values, loyalty, compassion, and mainly belief in God and the beauty of a Jewish life. I am sure it was not always easy for them to be children of Holocaust survivors, but we did the best we could, and I'm so very proud of them that they turned out to be the wonderful, compassionate, and successful human beings they are today. They, along with their wonderful wives, raised their children with the same values we imparted into them. I'm sure Becky and Adam will raise our beloved Judah the same way. I hope that they will always remember their Opa, who loved them dearly and whose life was energized every Monday night by your weekly visits. Thank you, Jessica, and you wonderful students for your many long hours of tremendous hard work, compassion, and mainly your friendship. What did the war teach you?
How cruel people can be when they don't think for themselves and they blindly just follow.
War teaches insanity. It also makes me question if there really is a God.
War taught me that there are evil people in the world.
Это убийство, кошмар. That killing is nightmare.
That so much of the world was cruel, but there also were people who risked their lives to help. We cannot forget that.
What is hope? And do you have it?
What would we have if we didn't have hope?
Yes, I have hope. Hope looks like my grandchildren and my great-grandchild.
I have hope. I believe life gets better.
Of course, I have hope. I think hope is the only thing that kept me alive.
My father came to me in a dream that night, with his protective arms stretched so wide. I think he came back to remind me to never give up hope. So yes, in the darkest, most frightening moments of life, I make the choice to choose hope. I will always choose hope.